Any more comments? Or Carolyn, would you like to say anything? Or
sure.
When I interviewed with Joe, which is about 20 years ago now, he was working the pharmacy counter. And when he alluded to things happening at Boone Drug, that's true. There's a lot of attorneys, a lot of judges, a lot of community folks would meet for lunch down there. A lot of community kind of decisions were made, and Joe was active in that kind of thing. But he was doing the pharmacy that day, and I came down. There was always a special for the day. The special that day was pork chops, and so I remember having pork chops on my plate, and he had pork chops on his plate, and then the phone rang, and then he'd go answer the phone, and then he'd come back, and we'd talk about another half dozen words, and the phone would ring again, and off he'd go. In the meantime, somebody came in and wanted to have a prescription filled, so I can still see he had the Oxford long sleeve shirt on with the button-down collar. He had labels up and down his arm, and then he'd go fill, and he'd look, and then he'd take the pills and he'd shush them in the bottle, and then he'd try to find the prescription, and then the phone would ring again, and he'd say, "No, this really is Cheap Joe's," you know, and then "I'll be right with you, Carolyn," and you know, he's just doing this kind of thing. So multitasking is something that this guy can really do. But he meant so much to the community. He really did, and you can't walk down the street nowadays, but what you find somebody that has a Joe story. And how he impacted their lives. Some of them you'd rather not hear, you know. They would describe their ailments to him, and so he would try to come up with something that would make them feel better. But he's touched a lot of lives, and just recently, one of the really interesting things that happened is this was before I came here, but there was a doctor's offices, more than one, above Boone Drug. And so it was not uncommon for mothers to come and give birth there. And his mama was on the way to give birth, and she didn't quite make it. She just ended up on the curb, actually in the car on the curb. So Joe was born outside of Boone Drug. And that's a story that when he tells it, they look at me and go, and I go, yeah, this one is true, because they're not all true, you know. But anyway, what they did was they had a reunion for folks that were born up above the Boone Drug, and they allowed him to come in because he didn't quite make the fraternity, but they let him in anyway, right?
Yeah, they did.
Isn't that interesting? So, what sign were you born under?
I was born under the Boone Drug sign.
Bada boom. Bada boom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
but anyway, we're just delighted that you guys are here, that you're part of Cheap Joe's. We call each other. We say we're a family. We're getting to be a bigger and bigger family, but we just welcome y'all, and you honor us by coming the distance that you come, or short or long, to take a workshop, and we hope that your experience with Cheap Joe's is a good one. And if not, that's what I'm here for. Please share with me so that we can stop the bleeding and make sure that it doesn't happen to somebody else. So don't think of it as a complaint. Think of it as a gift, really, which is kind of backwards. But that's the only way we know how to fix something. So if you have an experience that doesn't quite meet what you were expecting, please give us a call. So, but again, thank you so much.
Yeah, we're so glad to have everybody here. We last year, yeah, thank you, Carolyn. Good. When we had the trade show, Boone in June, which we've done for the past 3 or 4 years, I guess. 7 years. Wow. And it just got bigger and bigger and kind of unmanageable. But we had one of our maintenance people count the different license plates from different states, and he counted. He came back and said, "How many different states are represented, Derek?" He said 62. So, yeah. Yeah. He's still with us. Yeah.
14 years.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah.
He does inventory.
Yeah.
Actually, he does do stocking.
He's a great guy, though. He really is. So, well, we could tell stories all night, I'm sure, but yeah. Well, I'll tell one that I have told. The margarita reminded me of it. There was this lady was dying and not doing well, and they called all the other sisters in to be around her. And one of them asked her, said, Sister Mary said, is there anything that we could do for you to make you a little more comfortable tonight? And she thought a minute and she said, well, you know, a glass of nice warm milk would sure be nice. And so they go down to the kitchen and look for milk and can't find any, but up in the cabinet they find a bottle of scotch. And one of them said to this, said, you know, if we warm that and take it to her in her condition, she probably won't know the difference. So they warmed a glass of scotch and they took it up to her. And she drank it, and they said, Sister Mary said, is there anything else that we could do for you? She said, well, you know, another glass of that milk wouldn't be bad. So they go down and get her another glass of scotch, warm it, take it back up to her, and she drinks it. And in a minute, one of the other sisters said, Sister Mary said, are there any words of wisdom you would impart on us before you leave? And she said, yeah. Said whatever y'all do, don't sell that cow. So, I'm sorry.
I said that was a new one.
A new one, oh. I've told a lot of the same ones, haven't I? My favorite story, and I've told it so many times, and some of you have heard it, I know, was keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You've heard it too?
No, I've heard them all.
Oh, you've heard them all?
Keep going.
Well, I lived across the hill here in a little holler, in a little cabin, and on up the holler was an elderly couple lived above me up there, and wonderful couple. And one day I heard a knock on my door, and I went to the door, and it was my neighbor, Mr. Wilson. And I said, how you doing, Mr. Wilson? And he said, well, he said, I'm all right, but said, Mabel said, she died last night, his wife. I said, I'm so sorry. And he said, well, she hadn't been well. And he said, but we're very poor and can't afford a store-bought funeral. And said, I know that you've got that pickup truck of yours. And said, I asked the carpenter across the hill, Phil, if he'd make a box to put her in, and he did. And said, I was wondering if you'd mind coming up with your pickup truck, and we'd pick her up in the box and take her up to the cemetery, which was up the hill. I said, I'll be glad to. So we got in the pickup and went up to his home, and we got the box and put it on the back of the pickup, and we headed up the hill to the cemetery. You could see it if it was not so leaves on the trees. But just as we got to the cemetery, on the gravel road, someone had dug a drainage ditch across the road to let the water drain off of the cemetery. And I hit it pretty hard with the pickup because I didn't see it right then. And we get on up there, and in the back, coming from that box. And I went back and opened it, and she sat up grinning for ear to ear. And of course, what had happened when I hit that ditch, it caused CPR and brought her back to life. Well, she got in the pickup with us and went back down the hill, and I took them home and backed over to the barn, put the box in the barn, went on back home. And I guess it was 2 or 3 years went by, and he came back down to my house. I said, how you doing, Mr. Wilson? He said, well, I'm all right, but said, Mabel said she up and died again last night. I said, I'm sorry. He said, well, I kept the box, you know, and said, you've still got that pickup truck, and said, if you don't mind, would you carry her back up there to the cemetery? I said, no, I'll be glad to. So we go up there and put it in the car and pick up, and we head up the hill. And just when we get to that drainage ditch, he reached over and grabbed me and said, slow down, son. Here's where we made our mistake last time. I just left.